You're the chairman.
That's fine. You mind? Okay. Is there a problem doing that, Kevin?
What's that?
If we did it in reverse order?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Let them get out quicker.
Well, in theory.
It'll make Mr. Douglas happy.
The solar thing.
Not sure about Jess, but
Or solar? RG, doing all their solar thing.
Oh,
All right, Bob, we are live and the floor is yours.
thank you. Welcome, everybody, to the zoning meeting for February. We're starting now right at 7 o'clock. I want to start out by having a pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. A few housekeeping notes before I get into some of the other stuff. The emergency exits, obviously you have exits right here on the side. There's exits on the other side of the atrium, and likewise likely where you came in on either side of the main room that we're in. We ask everybody to silence their phones, sign in at the front door if you haven't done so already. And from here, I will start the roll call. All those present signify by saying aye. Robert Peckham, aye. Beth Mossworth,
Aye.
John Migliorini,
Aye.
Christian Chamberlain.
aye.
Heather Robinson is absent. Tim Harrington,
Present.
Aaron Lehman.
Present.
Would anybody be interested in making a motion for the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the January minutes.
Second.
Seconded by John. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No one, and we have one absent. So with that, the meeting minutes from January, the motion carries. The meeting minutes are approved. Any other things I forgot right there? Okay. What?
Did you put a reminder for anyone to sign up in case they want to speak?
Yes.
Did you already
Twice.
mention?
Twice, yeah.
Okay, good.
So I'm going to start out the meeting. I'm going to actually do this in reverse order. There's only two notices to be, or two appeals to be heard today. But I want to have a little conversation about this ahead of time because I'm pretty sure there's some contention to one or both of these. The Zoning Board of Appeals is here to pay attention to the things that are applied and in front of us. We are paying attention to, for one application, parking spaces, and the other application we're paying to the shed size that's allowed. The reason I say this is because I do believe that we're going to hear some more from other people about what's happening here. There are multiple things that have happened already, or some that are coming with these applications. And again, we are very hyper focused on this. We don't want to get it spread out over different things. For example, the shed, what's in it, what's happening with it. These are things we pay attention to. We weigh out the benefit to the applicant versus the detriment to the neighborhood. And we make decisions based on this. Everybody's input matters to us, both the applicant as well as the residents. But we do make decisions on that for what's in front of us. I think also there's other components to some of these. For example, if we're talking about a shed, depending on what's in it, there might be a secondary permit required. If we're talking about parking spaces, it's not just parking spaces. There's also been permits in place for the buildings and other things that are happening. We are focused on parking spaces. So I want you to keep that frame of mind intact when we're discussing this. We're going to ask questions. We want to hear pros and cons to these things that we're hearing. And we will make a decision based on that. So that's what you should expect today. The other thing is, since we're down one person, we have to have a majority of 4 in order for something to pass or be denied. So we are at a little bit of a disadvantage for that piece of it. So we'll proceed. I am going to start out of order. So we're going to start with application number 2022-091, Roger Michael Douglas, and I hope I say it right, Zahara El Nuami. Did I say it right? Okay, please come up to the podium. I will ask you to state your name and address for the record, and then we'll ask a series of questions, obviously. Welcome. Thank you, Mike.
Can you check the microphone is on the podium, please?
Hold one
Can't
second.
hear him. Thank you.
Now it's on.
Mike, I'm going to ask you to repeat it for the record. I apologize.
No problem. Mike Douglas, 112 Armbruster Road, Rochester, New York.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Beth, would you like to get started?
Mr. Douglas, in regards to the shed, this would be the second shed at the property?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and the variance is requesting a shed that's 163 square foot versus the code, which is 135, correct?
Yeah, it's 25 feet over.
28.
I believe he said something like that.
Is the shed going to have electricity in it?
No, ma'am.
Okay, water or?
No, ma'am.
Okay. What is the intent for the second shed, being that there's already one?
For racing homers, pigeons.
Okay, so to house them, to race them in the shed? Give me a little
Yeah.
description.
Yes. Basically, we take them to the club. They'll take them as far as Virginia, say maybe 7 at a time. And they release them. They come home, they get clocked, they go right in. And basically that's how you race them.
And how many do you anticipate having?
Around 35, but it fluctuates due to losses. Like there's sometimes a 50% loss ratio, so I can be upwards of 50 but on an average 35.
And can you give us description of where you are in process for having pigeons at this shed?
Actually, they're there. Steve actually showed up tonight and looked at it. And they basically said last week that none of them were gonna not approve it. They just he wanted to come and make sure that I met the American Racing Pigeon Union's standards. They have 7 standards they want to meet. And I showed him that I could meet every standard.
And that's for your special use permit? that you're
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And if you don't mind, Beth, I'm going to step in here for a second. As I mentioned a minute ago, we do have multiple permits in place to deal with the situation of having pigeons, which is not an atypical use for a shed, at least in the Henrietta code and things of that nature. So there is a second permit that will be going in front of the town special use permit that will allow or deny the use or the housing of pigeons.
And I already have that.
It's approved?
Not yet. He wanted to come tonight to make sure that I met all the standards. So they basically, they were very enthusiastic about it and they thought it was really neat. They did a lot of research. And so he came tonight. I showed him.
And Steve is our supervisor.
Yes, sir. And then I don't know the woman that sits all the way to the far left during the meetings.
Would be Lisa Bolzner.
Lisa,
Lisa, yeah, she was very interested too, and she thought it was really neat. And we were kind of joking. I said, yeah, you're gonna end up with a pigeon up there next, you know? No, but just joking. But I think she wants to come see it and maybe Friday. But he said, yeah, it's great. He took pictures. He made sure there was enough space in there. It's not crowded. I have all the perches. They have sunlight, they have air. Their food is contained. All their excrements I take to a farm in Walworth. So yeah.
perfect.
So in regards to the shed, it looks like it's a slant roof shed. Is
Yes,
that
ma'am.
correct? So approximately at its highest peak, how tall is it?
10 foot.
Okay. And then windows or doors?
Yep, I have a door in the back. It's standard 34, I believe, inch door. There's one window in the front that it's actually going to be made bigger. It's so they can come out and get into the Sputnik. And when they race, they land on that and drop through. And it's kind of 4-inch space, 45-degree angle, so they can never get out of it, only enter it.
And
Yeah.
that's the main larger window at the top of the peak?
Nope, that's for sunlight because they need sunlight. you know what I mean? And ventilation. I have to finish putting fascia on. I stopped everything, like even Steve, seeing I didn't even finish putting the door handle on the door. As soon as I got word of, whoa, you know, and I found out I had permits and everything, I just stopped all construction. And so I still have to put up venting and soffit and, but I got it painted. So, and I showed him where I was gonna landscape. And yeah, he thought it was neat because the way my yard is, there's trees. You cannot see anything from those two. And my neighbor, he brings his kids over, before I realized I couldn't have birds. But he would bring his kids over and see the birds and actually other neighbors have came too. But yeah, and then I found out you had a special use permit.
So where it is in the yard, it is, as I was trying to find where it was, it is kind of, like you said, hidden. Is that intentional to kind of keep the birds safe? How did you come to that placement?
Well, where the other shed is located, it's just back corner of the lot. My neighbor has another big shed right next to mine on the other side of they're like round ferns. They're probably, I don't know, 10, 12 foot high. They create a wall around the yard. So, but no, just for yard usage is why I put it there. I'm going to make it really nice and, but a lot of the complaints were from people were and that's what Steve was telling me, the old chicken coop. But he found out there's no scent, there's no droppings, there's no feathers, it's clean, and on my coop in the summer, I can take the front off, the piece of wood, lets beautiful ventilation. And then the way I built it on the sides, I have that clear corrugated plastic up on the sides and I can take that off for the venting. And I use very small wire, so no mice. It's built off the ground, so nothing can hide or dwell there.
Right.
And so.
How long have you had the pigeons at this location?
Probably 4 months.
Okay. Any issue with wildlife otherwise?
No.
Okay.
Nope. I like birds, so I feed all the sparrows and, the chickadees this time of year, so.
Any other questions from board members right now? Okay. So I'll have you have a seat because I suspect there's going to be other people in the audience. Is there anybody here that wants to speak in regards to this? You do, please feel free to come up to the podium and I'll ask you to state your name and address for the phone number or for the record, I meant to say. You can bend it.
Pardon?
You can bend it.
Nancy Haberberger, 180 Amston Drive.
Welcome, Nancy.
I'm not real happy about this building. Quite a bit bigger than what's allowed. And I think that it's easier to not grant a variance than to try to take away one that's been approved. And I think we're zoned residential. I don't think we're zoned agricultural
Okay.
where we are. I think it's residential. And I just, it's sort of like a business. And I'm just concerned that it's gonna make my property and the property of the other people in the area lose their value somewhat. So I'm not in favor of it.
What is your thought process behind why it would lower the value of the neighborhood?
Well, I'm just thinking of feathers and feces and the possibility of rodents and I just think it should be out on a farm.
Okay.
I read a lot of books about England and they're very big on pigeons, but they're out in a farm somewhere. They're not in a residential area. They don't keep them in a residential area. So,
Okay,
okay.
thank you for your input. We appreciate it. Is there anyone else that would like to ask questions or make comments about the application? I will read, we did get one resident that put in her concerns. She was not able to attend tonight. She doesn't feel that it looks like a shed. She feels that it's used exclusively to house pets and pigeons in this case. And so again, doesn't have questions about special approvals and some other things. I'm not reading all of it, but this is the gist of what she's asking. She is a neighbor, and again, couldn't make it here today. Thinks her other comment is it's too big. So this is what we're here to address, obviously. Does this comment that came through make any other questions for the board members?
Mr. Chairman, can we ask the question, what is code in Henrietta as it relates to storing and keeping pigeons?
You wanna?
Yep.
I
So I'm
have
gonna
the
actually read the
special-
section of code. It's 295.42 animals in a residential districts. In any residential district, no lot shall be used or occupied, no structure may be erected, maintained, or used for the raising of harboring of pigeons, swine, goats, rabbits, cows, horses, poultry, foxes, mink, skunk, or other fur-bearing animals unless a application is made to and a special use permit is granted by the town board, subject to such terms and conditions as may be appropriate to the particular case and in conformity with the provisions of Article 12 and the following general provisions. The board may consider where it is material in each case and among other relevant factors in regards to that special use permit. So
just to
there is an allowance within the town code that's
to approve this or decline it.
to approve or decline based on conditions met by the town board for special use, correct?
Correct.
So anybody with any pet, racing, pigeon, et cetera, could apply for a special use and utilize their residential lot for same, correct?
Correct, regardless of, yeah, well, residential, yes, correct.
So the point, Mr. Chairman, is that
There are 4 points there if you want to, I can read those to you that that the town board considers for a special use permit.
Please share.
Any danger to a neighboring property, noise or offensive emission of odor or fumes, any detriment to the health, safety, morals, or the general welfare of the community, whether such use is appropriate to the particular location.
So
Again, those are for the town board.
For the town board. So the secondary permit, oh, I'm sorry, Tim, you had a question. I'll wait.
I was gonna say that, so the to your point earlier, the special use permit addresses that concern, pigeons in Henrietta.
Yes.
Residential. Our focus is on the size
28-foot
of the shed.
excess
Got it.
shed space.
I have no more questions then.
You do or don't?
I do not.
So with those factors, and just to repeat what was said for clarity, there will be a second special use permit coming about, and that's in the next week or so, that you will be going from the town board. Our assessment here is explicitly for the size of the shed, as Tim mentioned, and we will render a vote on this. Is there any more questions from the members of the audience? And Heather, I think you still said there's nobody online, correct?
That is correct. No residents.
Yeah, that's a good point. Mr. Douglas, can I have you come back up to the podium?
If you could just touch upon the concern about excrement and feathers that was raised by the resident.
Yeah, as I said, it's all contained. There's nothing open, there's no open windows, so it doesn't happen, and there is no smell. It's not like a chicken coop, You know what I mean? And that's what Steve's concern was.
Actually, just to be clear, we don't know what you mean. To
Oh.
us, pigeons, I know what a pigeon is, but I have no reference at all to pigeon
Okay.
hygiene or anything else. So please actually be explicit on what you're saying. here,
Okay, so
please.
once a week I clean the coop. Basically where they perch is where they poo. They don't just all over the place. It's easy to clean up. I take it to a farm in Walworth. Another gentleman, his name is Dan. He has a farm and he has a huge where he grows vegetables, everything, huge garden. So he uses it all from all of us. And yeah, I mean, it's not like Steve came, there's no feathers anywhere. And they're not like your typical pigeon. They don't just go fly in somebody's house or it's not like that. You let them,
Why is that?
I don't know. They want to come home. That's why they're homers. They're named homers. You let them out a half hour before feeding time. They get their exercise and they come right in for feeding.
Where do
And
you let them out?
I'll take them to all over. Actually, I work all over. I own my own business painting. So if I'm working in Canandaigua, I'll take them to Canandaigua in the morning. I'll release them and I have cameras and I can see what time they come back and that's part of training. So, yeah,
So you'll release them in Canandaigua and they'll come back here?
You said
absolutely.
Virginia earlier.
Yeah, they come back from Virginia. The farthest known recorded flight was 7,000 miles. A bird made it back.
So you had mentioned that when they go in, it's at a slope that it goes down so they can't come back out again.
Absolutely.
So the only way they come out is when you open to let them out.
Oh, no, I don't just let them out there. I take them, I put them in a
Mhm.
carrier
Okay.
and I take the carrier with me. And this time of year, no, because the hawks are really bad right now. So typically I won't let them out until March. I won't start training them.
So they're not allowed to just leave the coop at any time. It's a controlled
sir.
release. Yeah.
So it's not like a chicken where they'll let them out for the day and then they come back in and
No,
they do their.
no, these are too expensive. They have pedigree just like horses. So I have papers, on them.
For pigeon.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, one just sold for $1.9 million. Wow. 65,000, 50,000, 40.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't know, you don't know. Most people don't know.
Don't know?
You know what I mean? But we do it for the sport, the hobby. My son loves it. My other son, my two daughters, they love it. They go to the club meetings. Like we'll go to Syracuse, all the upstate clubs get together, and it's kind of neat. It's cool for the kids. We'll take them to the state fair and show sometimes. So
Good.
it's good for the kids.
One question, actually, your neighbor had mentioned about it being a business. It's not a business. It's just a hobby.
Yeah, it's
You're
a
not in it to
hobby.
make money or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's just.
No, if you wanted to make money, then those are called one loft races. So basically what you do is I would send them babies or eggs. They would foster them, or I buy them from them. I would pay $1,000 for them to raise the bird. And that is for one bird. And then they race your bird. And if it wins out of 8,000 birds that they have, you win the top prize of 400,000, 200,000, stuff like that. So even if that was to happen, it doesn't happen here. The only thing that happens here is we all get together. They're timed. It's basically bragging rights. You get a trophy, but there's no money involved in our club.
So you're not doing it for a business, you're doing it for fun.
No,
for
and I
your-
don't
but-
sell for squab and I don't sell pigeon eggs. So, I mean, I can see where they're misconstrued, but it's obvious, absolutely no.
I just wanted to answer because your neighbor did mention something about it
Yeah.
being a business. I just wanted to have clarify. So.
Yeah.
that's fine. Thank
So clarified under testimony.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any more questions from the board members?
No.
Okay. So with that, I'd like to close this application.
Do
Do we want time? No,
we need to discuss? Because we did.
I will ask a quick. Thumbs up or not? Okay. Nope, I don't need time.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, in regards to application number ZBA 2022-091 for an area variance, I move to approve as follows, whereas the zoning board has, one, duly advertised and held a public hearing, two, has considered all relevant information, and three, has considered the potential benefit to the applicant versus potential detriment to the neighborhood or community in relation to such variance. Now, therefore, it be resolved that the zoning board of appeals makes the following findings of fact. The variance will not result in an undesirable change to the character of the neighborhood or detriment to nearby properties. The variance can not be achieved by some other feasible alternative. The variance will not have a negative effect on the physical or environmental conditions. The difficulty related to the variance was self-created, and be it further resolved that based upon the above findings, the zoning board of appeals hereby approve the variance as presented.
Second.
Seconded by Christian. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So the motion does carry. So the extra square footage on your sheds has been approved. There is still the other component of this that has to be dealt with. That's another place for neighbors and members to have a discussion with the town board.
Okay.
Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you so much, guys.
You're halfway there.
All right.
Have a good evening.
Best of luck. With that, I would like to call up application 2022-088, the Southridge Landing. Dakota Partners.
Oh, he's bringing paperwork.
Kind of contract is it?
Hey, Jess, which rendering are you gonna put up on the easel so I can put it up on the screen?
I was just gonna put the site plan up. I didn't plan on putting it up unless we need to reference it. I think everyone's pretty familiar with it, but any site plan will do.
Okay, thank you.
She's good.
Speaking to me from.
Yes, that's very
The voice, the voice.
Is that you?
so. I'm gonna repeat some of the things I said a minute ago. I just want to make sure that we are very clear on what we say. Today, we are here to discuss parking spaces. And actually a reduction in parking spaces. So all the things that come in from the neighborhood or others is important to us. We do weigh it. As you know, we're here for at least the second time for this board. But this is what we're focused on, these parking spaces and maximizing the need and the concerns that we have as well. So that's what we're going to talk about. With that, Mr. Harrington, I think you can start it or.
Yeah, so this is the second time we discussed this. When you were here last, it was a couple meetings ago. Presented some facts, we challenged them. We had some residents that had some opposition that brought up some good points. We talked about, could you reduce the density of the project, reduce the demand on parking? Ask questions about what would happen with things like snow. Residents have medical transports that come, friends that come, family members that come, what would happen? So we suggested that there would be some more thought put into land bank and other related things. So you've done some more research, brought us some more data. So can you please summarize the new data that you bring to us at this meeting, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Harrington. In response to last, and again, I'm sorry, Jess Sudol from Passero Associates, with me, Josh Saxton, also from Passero, and Angela from Dakota Partners, representing the applicant and the developer. Yes, but since the last meeting, we've spent quite some time, several months actually, putting together as much data as we reasonably could to try to justify the numbers that we were presenting for the variance, and going from the 2.5 unit down to what now, when you include the land bank parking, which I'll talk about in a bit, is approximately 1.7 spaces per unit. And I don't know how much it was talked about last time, but we'll get a little bit into units versus beds. And I just want to point it out that those are two very different things. And, you know, in my experience in doing this for 20 years, it does make a lot more sense to really boil this down, which is what we've done, and look at the amount of beds. Because, you know, we have projects here in the town that I've worked on personally that this board has granted parking variances for that have 5 beds in 1 unit, or you have a studio unit. So it's very different. So I think it's important that, you know, we did go through this effort that, you know, you all requested us to do that. So the first thing we did, and I'll get into our actual parking study last, but I do want to point out most of the information you received in the packet Josh just handed out, you received previously as part of the application. There is one new addition, and it's this chart right here. And all this chart does is summarize the data in a very, compact manner. There's not a lot of numbers on there. We looked at it every which way, but these are really the main numbers that we speak to. So it's a little bit easier to look at it quickly if that's your preference compared to looking at some of the bigger charts. And going a little bit out of order, first of all, Dakota owns thousands of units. They do this every day, day in and day night. So they know, what parking they have, at their complexes, and that number is listed there on a per unit basis and on a per bed basis. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. That just is what it is. We also looked at the Institution of Transportation Engineers Manual, which I'm sure, I don't know how much this board hears about it, but certainly the planning board hears a lot about the IT manual as it relates to traffic and parking. So that actually provides ratios on a per unit and, more importantly, again, on a per bed basis. So we looked at those numbers. And then probably most importantly is we did our own kind of boots on the ground study of the local market. And we started with looking at 24 properties. We then boiled that down to 4 properties that were, close to, where we are. So it was a comparable market as possible. We looked at projects that had a different diversity in terms of unit mix. We looked at market rate. We also looked at properties that were also affordable. And again, just not to go down the whole affordable rabbit hole, because that's more of a fair housing discussion than it is a discussion for the zoning board. But it doesn't mean low income or anything like that. It's just based on income levels, and it's people that work at Wegmans, or it's people that work up on Jefferson Road or at the hospital. So we did look at projects that also contained that demographic. We went out there and we counted during the times, which is very inconvenient for the people we send out there, but late at night and early in the morning when everybody is actually on site. That's just the reality of it. I've been there myself. And counted, first of all, how many parking spaces are there? How many people are actually parked there? How many physical cars are there? And then we spoke with each one of those just to verify the number of units they had, as well as their unit mix. So how many 1 beds, 2 beds, 3 beds, et cetera, do they have? So that we could ultimately determine how many beds each one of those properties have. And that's what's boiled down in the chart that was previously shown to this group, which is right here. Just to reiterate, you do see a total parking number. That's actually the ratio of spaces that are provided, not cars. And then you see the used parking. That's actually how many spaces are actually occupied, how many cars are on site. And then there's just a slight adjustment for the occupancy. But in this case, all of the properties that we studied, when we boiled it down, had occupancy ratios over 95%. Industry standard is 90 and 95. So they're all fully occupied for all intents and purposes. Then we broke down the numbers again on a per unit basis and on a per bed basis. Based on those findings, again, whether you're referencing this chart or this one, and I'm sorry if the audience can't see it as well, you can see that, when you look at, first of all, when you look at Dakota's portfolio of doing these projects all over, both on a per unit basis and on a per bed basis, based on the parking that is currently proposed, that was approved as part of the special use permit process and the site plan and everything else. We are well in excess of that. We're well in excess of the rates that are published by ITE. We're certainly very much in excess of the average ratio for units and for beds when you look at each of the projects that we studied. And then when you look at, we called it the most similar project. The reason why we called it the most similar project is because it has the most similar unit mix in terms of numbers of 1s and 2s being heavily weighted on the 2s, which is similar to our project. I believe that the last time we were here, it was like, well, how can you compare yourself to that project if that's all 1 bedrooms and you guys have a lot of 2s, and that's not really a fair ratio, which is why I think it's so important that we boiled it down to beds, because a lot of that discussion somewhat goes out the mix. But in the case of Winton Village, they have a very similar unit mix. Now that project, like Lehigh Park, are actually fully market rate. So there's, Lehigh Park, for example, has rents that exceed $2,000 per unit. So we would expect that the amount of cars in those projects, because people are making, usually 6-figure incomes, would be more so than our proposed project. So Winton Village is market rate. So we would expect that to have the highest ratios of one of the highest ratios of the projects we studied. And it in fact does. But even in that case, we are higher than it on a per unit basis. And again, we are higher than it on a per bed basis. Now, with all of that said, those are just based on the proposed 93 parking spaces that are on our site plan. So in addition to that, we kind of said, okay, well, what if all the data we have, which we think is significant, and we've checked it now at least 3 different ways, not even relying on Passerow's experience of being professional engineers in the industry and doing 5,000 to 6,000 units a year. So we kind of checked all 3 of those boxes, and we said, okay, well, what if we're somehow wrong, which we're very confident we're not. I think I've done 10 to 12 parking variances in the town of Henrietta in my 20 years, and never once have had to go back and build a land bank spot. But we did say, at least let's show that a land bank space is doable, just in case something wasn't factored. I'm pretty confident everything has been. So we did go back and add 12 spaces to show that where we could easily accommodate that potential overflow, even though we don't think we'll ever need them. And then on this chart here again, you'll see those adjusted ratios that say, if we build the 12 land bank spaces and take our number from 93 to 105, then those ratios, obviously on a per unit and a per bed basis, are even higher, and then have an even higher ceiling than where we are now. And where we are now is higher than, every other benchmark that we've established. And I think we've done a fairly thorough job of doing that. Again, there's the opportunity to, add more parking if we had to on site. But, every parking space that's built that's not utilized. And when you look back at some of these old projects, when you have, 39% occupancy ratios, that means you have 60% of the parking lot that's sitting there vacant. That's 60% of the lot that had unnecessary environmental impact, removal of vegetation, removal of trees, decrease in screening, the lack of, being able to, impact glare from lighting or from headlights. And we really don't want to do that. We're very comfortable with the parking that we're proposed, extremely comfortable, and even more so with the land bank. And we've also spent a lot of time working with the community. We've been at this for about a year now in the town, with the town board and then the planning board, to really get this to a site layout that's been based on a lot of public input that we received at 3 different neighborhood meetings, and also the public hearing as part of the special use permit process. So we're really comfortable and happy with where we're landed, and we're really comfortable with the amount of parking that we're proposing. And we think we've done a good job, and thanks to the board for asking us to do that additional homework. But we think we've checked most of those boxes.
Thank you for doing that homework. Very thorough. Well done. For everyone online and anywhere that was listening, can you please define what land bank actually is? Does that mean it's designed and you won't use that space for anything and except a parking spot, but you will only turn it into a parking spot if you need to turn it into?
Yeah, so it's accounted for in our site plan so that it could be, if we needed it, we could instantly build it, or the code enforcement, if the town's code enforcement officer said you have a parking issue, you have to do something about it. There's no design that needs to occur because that's already been done. There's no approval that has to occur because that's already be accounted for. We can essentially do it instantly. So we're saying that we've designed this so that this area could be parked, but we're not going to pave it because the green space is going to be more beneficial to everybody than having unused asphalt there. But if we ever need it, it's there.
Right. Great. Thank you for that. I think probably the most relevant is Winton Village, because we all know that across from MCC, and it's been there for a long time. And when you look at those numbers, total parking spots 370, in a very recent study showing parking counts of 243, that's a pretty telling story right there.
Yeah, it's funny. It's not. We find it everywhere. I mean, there's a lot of empty parking lots in multifamily projects wherever we go.
Winton is
I'm sorry, you're right. I'm thinking of Rustic Village, but thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So same point, wrong location.
Wrong location. When you're looking at parking spaces and utilizing or designing that for the site, I think you said it's 1, but do you prefer to understand bedroom count or unit count? What was the one that you said was more important?
Me, bedroom count.
So the number of bedrooms per unit in our case is 2.1 on average, correct? Am I reading this right? There's 62 units, 130 beds.
Correct, just over 2. Yeah, it's mostly 2.
Just over 2. So you have the highest bed count per facility studied. You have 105 spaces available, but 93 planned. Correct?
We have 105 available with the land bank, correct,
Yeah.
and 93 planned. Yes, that's correct.
And you're expecting that you'll be somewhere in the 38 or what range, what percentage of parking lot utilized do you anticipate? So that's an NA here. So I'm just curious what you anticipate.
Of the 93 that we're proposing,
Yes.
I would say, the average daily peak would be about 80 to 85% of that with, 10 to 12 spaces that would be left over if you had visitors or somebody had multiple visitors for some particular reason. That's typically what we see in the as-built condition when we go back out there. So,
80 something percent.
so maybe 70.
So, now I wasn't here on the first time you guys were here. I was out of town. But what I did hear a lot of was, there was a lot of comment about, the fact that there will be some handicap accessible units in here. Is it safe to assume that all of these other, facilities that you've identified also have handicap units identified or like?
100%, it's part of the building code.
And so those situations should again still maintain the same ratios.
Yeah, and that's why it's important to actually kind of say, forget about the ITE manual and the charts and graphs. Let's go look at actual facilities that have similar people living there, that have visitors, that have handicap parking needs that, are really going to be apples to apples.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Go ahead, Eric.
I'm curious, you label the stormwater management area. What practice of stormwater management are you anticipating to use there?
What practice you mean out of the DEC manual?
Yeah, is it bioretention, detention?
Yeah, so I think it's actually designed as a P1, which is a wet pond. Almost all stormwater practices now have bioretention and retention elements in them.
Mhm.
There's pre-treatment and then there's the bioretention, and then usually there's the retention portion, which controls the quantity. So it has kind of all of the above the way it was justified.
And so I'm assuming that it could handle snow load if you were needing to plow snow from the parking lot into it.
Yeah, 100%. Whether it's snow or the rain that falls there, it all ends up there.
And the reason I ask is because I look at this and I see, I don't see needing to plow snow into a parking space. I can see it being stored outside the parking lot.
Right. And that was intentionally done with this design, which, interestingly enough, on social media, there's these construction watch groups. And this site plan has been heavily criticized for having too much parking in the social media world, which is ironic. But we've intentionally laid it out to avoid the sea of parking effect, where you have a building and then a giant sea of parking in front of it. And that's when people end up stacking snow. We only have a single aisle that goes all the way around that's double loaded to try to avoid those types of conditions.
The land bank spots are designated on the north side and the west side of this building of the facility, correct? I'm asking, it's red on the screen. It's not red on here.
It's as shown on the screen there. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
And I am curious as to why you are, or how many charging stations and parking spaces you are designating. Are those purely for, I'm assuming they're going to be only for charging cars that would be charging off them.
Yeah, that's the idea. Do we have 2 now? I think we have 2, and then we have it wired to go up to 4 if needed.
Okay.
Put the conduit in so it's
Right.
easy to do.
Yeah. It's a lot cheaper to put it there than have to go back and
Tear
run
up
it again.
sidewalk and everything else. Yeah.
I have no more questions.
John, I'm good. Thank you for the testimony. We'll be asking if there's any members of the audience that have questions.
Thank
I
you.
imagine there are. Please feel free to come up and, as you know, state your name and address. You're welcome to stay there if you want to. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm Joanne Thayer, 201 Thompson Road.
Welcome.
And I know they're going to get this, but my main concern, since they reduced the parking spaces, it's a 3-story building.
Mhm.
Okay. Is the fire truck going to be able to get down there?
That is something, I'm gonna look over to Kevin or
That was the issue in the very beginning, getting the big fire truck, the hook, the ladder, whatever you call it. And it's a nice one. I've seen it
sure.
floating around here. But this has come up so many times that we lose neighbors as it goes along. And if it were to catch on fire, I just want to make sure they do supposedly have an access road between CVS and the daycare that is supposed to be gated at all times, except if there's a fire. Okay?
Yep.
Which I'm sure it won't be gated all the time. Eventually. I know how things work,
Okay.
but my main concern is for the people living in the unit. Is the emergency vehicles able to get the ambulance? Yes, but is that hook and ladder truck able to get down in that area, be able to turn around, put out a fire? That's my main concern, is for the residents that are going to live there.
With that
Okay.
said, I'll
Yeah.
start out with Kevin here.
Passrow has submitted the turning radius for the fire apparatus and it all works. It all
It will,
it meets-
okay,
meets- it complies, yes.
okay, I just want to make sure.
Thank
So,
you.
because I live there, there's going to be trees and everything, so,
Sure.
okay.
That was probably one of our first comments to them, so
Oh, okie dokie.
Good.
always is.
If the fire department was down there, they would use the access road that's normally closed.
No, if they need to get around.
If they need to get around, exactly. So that's part of it.
They're
Yeah,
not gonna
just if
do
I
it. You-
could shed some light on that, just because I
Please
happen
do.
to be particularly passionate about this subject. We spent close to 6 to 8 months working closely with the fire department on the access to this building specifically, and without rehashing every single point along the way. We did a lot of things such as widening the drive lanes, investigating different access options. Most notably adding the loop road so that the building now has 360 degrees, which it didn't previously have. The building has been reoriented to provide that type of access that's needed. So we've gone through multiple iterations as part of the site plan process until we got to a point where we could finally satisfy the fire department that they could adequately and safely service this building. It was actually probably the pinnacle item that we dealt with through the site plan review process.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question for that? At least that's an.
Obviously, they needed room to build this project back there. So, I mean, I just wanted to make sure, because in the very beginning, it was 100, it looked very nice with 155 spaces. But, it is what it is.
Thank you for your input. We appreciate your concern. Are there more questions from the board? I will, after hearing the comments from the audience. Okay. With that, I think we can close the application. Oh, wait, hang on. Let me do a straw poll. Aaron, you're good? Tim, 3, 4, you're good? Okay, with,
Anyone online?
she said no, but
Oh, she did.
Heather, anybody online?
Correct. You're still good, Bob.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for checking. So with that, we can close this application. Mr. Harrington?
Mr. Chairman, with regard to application number ZBA 2022-088 for an area variance, I move to approve as follows. Whereas the zoning board has 1, duly advertised and held a public hearing, 2, has considered all relevant information, 3, has considered the potential benefit to the applicant versus the potential detriment to the neighborhood or community in relation to such variance. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the zoning board of appeals makes the following findings of fact. The variance will not result in an undesirable change to the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby properties. Significant research into parking spaces versus tenant needs have been conducted and concluded that the ratio proposed is sufficient, making no change to the character of the neighborhood. 2, the variance cannot be achieved in some other feasible alternative, given the available space, noting that many configurations were considered and this design maximizes available space. The variance is substantial, as this represents a significant reduction in parking spaces, but extensive research demonstrates, given the intended clientele of the facility, parking spots will be sufficient. 4, the variance will not have a a negative effect on physical or environmental conditions. The plan makes good use of limited available space. In fact, fewer parking spots reduces impermeable surface area, reducing the environmental impact. 5, the difficulty related to the variance was self-created as the plan for this housing was aware of the space limitation of this location. And be it further resolved that based upon the above findings, the zoning board of appeals hereby approves the variance as presented.
Second.
Seconded by John. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much. I hope you all have a good evening.
You too.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
the extra work.
Take care.
We appreciate the feedback here. Thank you, everybody. Oh, I'm sorry. And with that, we can close the zoning board meeting on February 1st at 7:50.
Thank you.